Well, hello again, friends, and thanks for tuning in on this Tuesday, April the 14th. I trust that you had a great holiday weekend, Easter weekend, and even if that meant that you had to be a little bit more socially distant from family and friends and church family than you might otherwise have been. In the end, I was reflecting on this, and it's about Jesus, right? Easter's all about Jesus, and we never have to worry about being socially distant from Jesus. He's always as close as the mention of his name. And so, one of my prayers is that you have had the opportunity over the weekend to really spend some time reflecting on who he is, thinking about Jesus, worshiping Jesus, and spending some quality time with him, just thanking him for his great gifts. So devotionally this week, we're going to be going back into the book of Proverbs, and we're going to be skipping around a little bit. I'm saving out a few passages for when we return to our in-person worship services and back to the series of messages that we have from the book of Proverbs in that way. And so we're stepping over a few places and just in order to preserve some of those passages for later. But the part that I want to share with you today is down at the end of chapter 5, where it says this: "For the Lord sees clearly what a man does, examining every path he takes. An evil man is held captive by his own sins. They are ropes that catch and hold him. He will die for lack of self-control. He will be lost because of his great foolishness." And just to put this into context, like this is Solomon, we've talked about this before, this is Solomon who's writing as a father would be writing to a son. And he's talking to him in earlier verses, the verses leading up to this, he's talking to him about issues of moral purity and faithfulness, which is a little bit ironic if you know some of Solomon's story, especially near the end of his life. But understanding that he's speaking here under the inspiration of God, the Spirit of the living God speaking through him. He's basically telling his son that if he wants to live his best God-honoring, God-pleasing, self-preserving even life, that staying faithful in our relationships is important, and that he should avoid being lured into more cavalier type relationships outside of the commitment of marriage, and that he should drink from his own well. That's the words that he uses. Rejoice in the wife of his youth, be captivated by her love alone. And so when he gets down here to the verses that we're looking at now, in verses 21 to 23, and starts talking about how the Lord sees what a man does and examines every path that he takes, that's the context that he shares that in. But even though that's the context that Solomon is applying it to, the truth of what he's saying can actually be applied to any area of life that we can think of. For the Lord sees clearly what a man or a woman does, and he examines every path that he or she takes. And listen, generally speaking, I know how passages like that make some people feel sometimes. Like some people are like, see, that's what I don't like about Christianity. I don't like being monitored all the time. I don't want anybody checking in on everything that I do. And so again, for some people, this is their checkout gate. They hear that kind of thing and they think, I'm just going to go and do my own thing. And they live their own life. They live how they want to, which isn't good, but at least you know where they stand. But I feel as though there are a whole lot of other people out there, and I'm guessing this might be a much larger group even, who are more conflicted than that. That they wouldn't be comfortable with the idea of turning away from God entirely, but they still want to do certain things and live a certain way. And that what ends up happening with them, and it's kind of an awkward dance, but they do it, is that they start living what are essentially effectively two different lives. And it kind of reminds me of the old the game that we used to play as kids, the red light, green light game, where as long as the leader's turned around and attentive, then everybody's standing completely pat, completely still, doing exactly what is expected of them. But then the moment that the leader turns around and is not looking anymore, then everybody scrambles. And like I said, for some people, that's how they treat life. Like in public or in polite circles, perhaps in Christian circles, they act one way, while their private life can reflect something quite different, actually. But what Solomon has to say to us here in Proverbs 5 tells us a couple of things, at least a couple of things, that I want to share with you really quickly. Number one is this. First of all, in case we're deluded into thinking something different, nothing that we do, no path that we take is hidden from God. Like, we can hide things. Some of us are really good at hiding things. Like, we can hide things from other Christians. We can hide things from our friends even. If we're really clever, we might be able to hide things from family members for a while. But Solomon says we don't hide anything from the Lord. He says, for the Lord sees clearly what a person does. The New International Version says that our ways are in full view of the Lord. That's how they translate that verse. In full, completely in full view, which means that in the end, the only person who really gets fooled is ourselves when we try to live those two different lives. And then the second thing from this verse that I think is important to know is that, if we don't get to this part, then the first part we might find a little bit, we might begin to resent a little bit. But the second part is this, that it's important to know that God isn't watching us in order to be restrictive. He's actually a liberator. That's God's nature. And in our passage, Solomon tells us something that's actually really very interesting. He says that an evil man, which we would never consider ourselves to be evil perhaps, but what they're talking about here is somebody who does things that are wrong, which would be evil. Anything that isn't godly is evil. And so an evil man is held captive by his own sins. And his own sins are the ropes that catch and hold him. Like, do you see that? It's not God that restricts us. It's not God that ties us up. That's a lie that we believe sometimes, but it's not grounded in truth. And it's actually the things that we do that are contrary to God's design and purpose for us that do that. Those actions are ropes that catch and hold us, Solomon says. And I think internally, for the person who is in that situation, that they actually know that. And they just need to have it affirmed for them. Friends, God unties ropes. That's what he does. He sets us free. And today, one of the things that I just want to leave with you is that you would consider this, that we would make choices that recognize daily, that we would make choices that recognize the freedom of those who live for God and not for themselves. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you all again tomorrow. Bye for now.